Hello, everyone. I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're diving into a story where just one simple question, "Mom, where is your hometown?" was enough to send chills down James's spine and unravel a buried family secret in Hatay. Could love survive when the truth threatens to tear everything apart? If you enjoy stories full of drama, emotion, and shocking twists, don't forget to hit subscribe so you won't miss our next videos. Just one simple question, "Mom, where is your hometown?" was enough to make James feel a chill run down his spine. That was how it started. Not with a fight, not with a scandal, not even with the DNA test. It started with a question he should have asked 20 years ago. The house smelled like sticky rice and green leaves that afternoon. Diep was sitting on a low wooden stool, carefully folding banana leaves around a square of rice, mung beans, and pork. Little Ly sat beside her, hands clumsy but determined. "Okay, Ly, first the rice," Diep said gently. "Not too much. Spread it out evenly." Ly leaned closer. "Like this?" Then a little mung bean and one piece of pork, not too big." From the doorway, James watched them quietly. The scene looked warm, peaceful, like the kind of memory you hold on to when everything else falls apart. He stepped inside. "Smells amazing in here." Diep smiled. "We've been cooking since noon. These won't be done until late tonight." "Late?" he laughed. "I thought Bon Chung only needed a couple of hours." "That's rice," she teased. "This is Bon Chung. 8 to 10 hours. Sometimes more." He nodded, but his eyes weren't really on the pot. They were on her. On the way she folded the leaves so carefully, on how Ly leaned against her arm without even thinking. It looked like a family, and that was exactly what scared him. Earlier that morning, he had been on the phone with his mother. "I'll be going back to my hometown for a few days," she said casually. "For Tet?" James asked. "Yes, I haven't been back in a long time." He hesitated. "Where exactly is your hometown, Mom?" There was a pause. Just a second too long. "Hatay," she replied. "Hanoi now." He frowned slightly. "Hatay?" "Yes," he swallowed. "How far is it from here?" "Far enough. Don't worry about it." "I can ask Zook to drive you." "No." Her answer came too quickly. "I already booked a car." "You already booked one?" "Yes. You don't need to take me." James leaned back in his chair. "Mom, I'm sorry. I never really asked before. I don't even know much about your side of the family." Another pause. "It's not important," she said softly. "Some things are better left in the past." That sentence stayed with him. Some things are better left in the past. Now, standing beside the boiling pot, he couldn't shake the feeling that Hatay wasn't just a place. It was a locked door, and someone had just handed him the key. Later that evening, after Ly had fallen asleep, the house grew quieter. Only the crackling of firewood and the bubbling water broke the silence. James pulled up a small stool beside Diep. "You should rest," she said. "You've been working all day." "I'll stay," he replied. "If I don't help, the bon won't taste as good." She laughed softly. "That's not how it works." He watched the steam rise. "Maybe we should travel this Tet." "Travel?" she repeated. "Yeah, the Northwest. Just us. Make some memories." She turned to look at him carefully. "Why does it sound like you're trying to create memories before something happens?" He forced a smile. "What do you mean?" "I don't know," she said quietly. "The way you talk lately, it feels like you're preparing for something." He stared at the fire. "James," she continued, "is something wrong?" He opened his mouth, closed it again. There was so much he wanted to say. About the documents he found last week, about the old photo tucked inside his father's drawer, about the name written faintly on the back, a name he recognized, a name connected to Hatay, connected to Diep. "You remember when my mom said she's going back to Hatay?" he asked finally. "Yes." "I never asked her about it before. Isn't that strange?" "Not everyone talks about their past," Diep said gently. "But why hide it?" She didn't answer. Instead, she asked, "Why does it bother you now?" He took a slow breath. "Because I found something." Her hand froze midair. "Found what?" "An old hospital record." The fire popped loudly between them. "My birth record," he continued. "It wasn't issued in the town I grew up in." She looked at him carefully. "Where was it issued?" "Ha Tai." The word hung in the air like smoke. "That doesn't mean anything," she said after a moment. "Maybe not." But his voice lacked conviction. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "And there was another name listed. Not my mother's." Diep felt her heart skip. "Whose name?" "I don't know," he admitted. "The record was incomplete, but the surname—" He looked at her. "It's the same as yours." Silence. Only the boiling water answered. "James," she said slowly, "you're overthinking." "Am I?" "Yes." He studied her face. "Then why?" he whispered. "Have you always refused to step into my house?" She stiffened slightly. "That's not—" "Every time I ask you to come over," he continued, "you say it's not convenient. You say we can meet outside. Even when my mom invited you, you said no." She looked away. "It's complicated." "Complicated how?" She exhaled slowly. "Because loving you doesn't mean I have to be ready to face your whole family." "Or," he said quietly, "because you're afraid of what we might discover." Her eyes snapped back to his. "What are you implying?" He hesitated. Then the words slipped out. "What if there's a reason our families have never talked about Hatay?" She felt her pulse racing. "What reason?" He swallowed hard. "What if we're connected in a way we never imagined?" The fire crackled again. Diep shook her head. "Don't say things like that." "But what if it's true?" he pressed. "What if that's why you've always kept your distance from my house?" Her voice trembled slightly. "You think I knew something?" "I don't know what to think anymore." She stood up abruptly. "This is insane." "Is it?" His voice broke slightly. "Because I can't ignore the possibility." She turned back slowly. "Say it clearly, James." He looked at her, eyes heavy with fear. "What if we take a DNA test and find out we're related?" The world seemed to stop. Even the boiling water felt distant. Diep stared at him, unable to breathe for a second. "You're talking about being siblings?" she whispered. He didn't answer, but the silence was answer enough. She stepped back, shaking her head. "No, that's impossible." "Is it?" "Yes." "Then prove it." Her voice cracked. "You want to test our blood?" "I need to know the truth. And if the truth destroys us—" He looked down at his hands. "Then at least we won't be living in a lie." Tears welled in his eyes, but he blinked them away quickly. "You're crying," she said softly. "I'm not," he whispered. But he was, because for the first time in his life, love didn't feel safe. It felt fragile. And Hatay, a place he had never cared about before, suddenly held the power to tear everything apart. "Why would you even think something like that?" Diep's voice trembled, but she didn't look away this time. James ran his fingers through his hair, frustrated. "Because the pieces don't fit anymore." "What pieces?" "My birth record says Hatay. My mom avoids talking about her hometown. There's an old hospital document with your surname on it. And you—" He swallowed. "You've always refused to step into my house." "That has nothing to do with blood," she shot back. "Then tell me what it has to do with." Silence. The fire under the pot was dying down, but neither of them moved to add more wood. "I didn't want to go to your house," she finally said, "because I don't feel welcome there." James frowned. "You've never even tried." "I don't need to try to feel something," she replied. "Your father looks at me like I don't belong. Your mother is polite, yes, but distant. I don't want to put myself in a place where I feel judged." "That's not about DNA." "No," she said firmly. "It's about pride and self-respect." He leaned back, exhaling. "Then why does Hatay scare you?" She froze. "I didn't say it does." You didn't have to. She looked toward the dark doorway leading to Nee's room. Lower your voice. Answer me. Her jaw tightened. Because my mother was also from Hatay. James felt his stomach drop. You never told me that. You never asked. The same sentence he had heard from his own mother echoed in his mind. You never asked. He stood up slowly. Is this a coincidence? I don't know. Did our families know each other? I don't know. Her voice cracked, and that scared him more than anger would have. She pressed her palms against her forehead. When I was little, my mom would sometimes mention a family she used to be close with, but something happened. She never explained what. What family? She never said the name clearly, just regret and silence. James felt his pulse pounding in his ears. What if that family was mine? She didn't answer, because the possibility was suddenly too real. He stepped closer. Diep, look at me. She lifted her eyes slowly. If we are related, he said carefully, even distantly, we need to know. And if we're not, then we fight whoever tried to hide it from us. Her lips trembled. You really want to open that door? I already did. He walked to the corner of the room and picked up his phone. I called my mom again before coming here. Diep stiffened. What did she say? She said I should stop digging into things that don't concern me. That sounds like fear. It sounds like guilt. She shook her head. Or protection. For who? For you. He stared at her. What if, she continued softly, your mother left Hatay because something painful happened? What if bringing it up reopens old wounds? And what if the wound is us? The words hung heavy between them. Knees stirred faintly in the next room. Both of them instinctively turned toward the sound. She can't grow up in uncertainty, James whispered. She's not the one questioning her blood. She's our future. Diep looked at him sharply. Don't say our like that right now. He flinched. You don't get to claim certainty when you just suggested we might be siblings. He closed his eyes briefly. I'm sorry. The apology was quiet, but sincere. She walked back to the pot and lifted the lid slightly. Steam rushed out, fogging her face. 8 hours, she murmured. It takes 8 hours to cook this properly. What does that have to do with anything? You can't rush truth, she said without turning around. If you pull it out too early, it's raw inside. He watched her silhouette in the steam. Are you saying we should wait? I'm saying we shouldn't panic. He stepped closer again. Then tell me this. If I suggest a DNA test tomorrow, will you refuse? Her hand tightened on the lid. I don't know. That's not an answer. She turned slowly to face him. Because I'm afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid that you won't look at me the same way afterward. His expression softened. You think blood defines how I feel? If we were siblings, it would have to. He didn't respond immediately, because she was right. He sank back down onto the stool. I asked my mom one more thing. What? I asked her if she ever lost a child. Diep felt the air leave her lungs. And? She went silent. Silence again filled the space between them. She didn't deny it, he continued. She just said, some children are meant to grow up in different homes. Diep's fingers went cold. That's not proof, she whispered. No, he agreed, but it's not nothing either. She walked toward him slowly and sat down across from him. Let's think clearly, she said, forcing steadiness into her voice. Even if your birth record says Hatay, that doesn't mean we share blood. It means our histories intersect. That's not the same as genetics, but it's enough to question everything. She leaned forward. James, listen to me. Love is not built on paper. It's built on choice. And what if biology takes that choice away? She hesitated. Then she did something unexpected. She reached out and held his hand. If a test says we're not related, she said firmly, then we move forward stronger than ever. And if it says we are? Her grip tightened. Then we accept it, she whispered. We cry. We break. and then we rebuild our lives separately." His eyes filled again. "You're already preparing to lose me." "I'm preparing to survive." The pot began to rattle softly as the water bubbled harder. James stood up and added more wood to the fire. "Tomorrow," he said quietly, "I'm going to Hatai." She looked up sharply. "Without telling your mother?" "Yes, that could make things worse. Or finally clear them." She studied his face carefully. The fear was still there, but beneath it, determination. "Then I'm coming with you," she said. He blinked. "You don't have to." "I do." "Why?" "Because if our past is buried there, I want to see it with my own eyes." He nodded slowly. "Okay." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt different. Less like panic, more like the calm before something inevitable. From the bedroom, Nee's sleepy voice drifted out. "Ko Diep, is the bon ready?" Diep smiled faintly and wiped her eyes quickly. "Not yet, sweetheart. It needs more time." James looked at her. More time. Maybe that was what they needed too. But as the fire burned brighter and the steam rose higher, one truth became clear. Hatai was no longer just a hometown. It was the answer. And tomorrow, they would finally face it, together. As Tet approaches, what begins as a warm family moment between Diep, Little Nye, and James slowly turns into a haunting discovery about the past. A simple question about James's mother's hometown, Hatai, opens a door to secrets that were buried for decades. Strange birth records, unfinished hospital documents, and the same surname linking both families force James to confront a terrifying possibility. What if his love for Diep is built on a hidden blood connection? While Diep struggles with her fear and the distance she has always kept from James's family, the tension between them grows. Caught between love and truth, they face the ultimate question. Should they take a DNA test and risk losing everything? As they decide to travel to Hatai together, the future of their relationship hangs by a fragile thread.